Hello, everybody. This is Sophie from English Australia, and thank you for coming to this afternoon's webinar about embracing diversity. The presenters today are Louise Kane, who's the Director of Studies at Navitas in Brisbane, and Tegan McCarthy, who's the Academic Coordinator at Discover English in Melbourne. And Tegan and Louise have both are the founders of two different groups, which are support groups for LGBTQI international students in Australia. So Louise's group is called Rainbow Hub, and Tegan's group is called Rainbow Connections, and they're going to be telling you about the way that they've found is effective to support the international LGBTQI student community in Australia. So thank you, ladies.
Thank you. Thank you, Sophie, for that nice introduction. So yes, welcome to our presentation on embracing diversity. This presentation is not only about embracing diversity, but also to raise your awareness of how to support international LGBTQI students. Throughout this presentation, I'll be using the acronym, or we both will, LGBTQI. So is everyone aware of the meaning of this acronym? I think, Sophie, you were going to post. Oh, wow.
There's a poll up on your screen.
Wow, yeah.
Oh, that's nifty.
Oh.
Okay.
Great, cool. All right, we'll also be using the adjective queer as well, which represents an umbrella for LGBTQI. All right, good. Just moving forward. Just a bit slow. Maybe it hasn't had the coffee yet. Okay. So we'll start first with the question, who has lived overseas before? Who has moved overseas and lived in a different country? I assume most of us have. It's sort of second nature in this industry. And I know for myself, when I went and lived in all places, Dubai, UAE, the feeling was excitement and, well, yeah, basically excitement. But imagine if you were in this minority group, LGBTQI group, how would it feel then? I'm just going to click. This is Will from Brazil. This was his response. I'll just give you a few minutes to read that. Okay. So I think you can see from that response, having like a support group is quite important for LGBTQI. Okay. I'll let you think about this question throughout our presentation. You don't have to answer it now. Is it our responsibility as language teachers to consider including LGBTQI in our teaching materials? Okay. Before, I'm going to walk you through a few facts and situations with LGBTQI. We'll look at some Australian statistics to begin with.
Would you like to launch the poll now, or is it not?
Oh yes. Actually, yeah, let's do the poll. Let's do the poll, sorry.
Yeah. Oh. I'll get it up there.
Oh, that's the next one, but we can do that now. That's no worries. Do you know what the total number of international enrollments was for November 18? Okay, so 500,000, 700,000, or 870,000? Does anyone know? Take a guess.
About half the votes in.
Okay. Okay, cool. Oh yeah, wow. Everyone's really good at this. Yes, that is correct. 870,000. Yeah. We'll look at some more figures later on, but I'll just talk you through these figures. I'll just try again with the slide. Just a bit. Okay. So 75% of LGBTQI youth experience some sort of discrimination, whether that's physical or verbal abuse. It's broken down. So like verbal abuse is 61%. 24.4% experience depression. Compared with the rest of the general population, it's 6.8%. So it's nearly 3 times more. 16% attempt suicide. 35% of that is trans, whereas it's 3.2% of the general population. So some of those figures are quite confronting. Okay, so we guessed the correct amount of students. You can see from the other little table there, it's broken down. So in the ELACROSS world, that's 18%, so 152,000 enrollments were ELACROSS, which is great. Majority were higher education. Okay. The Australian statistics on the number of international students who identify as LGBTQI is difficult to gauge. However, there is another poll which should come up soon. What percentage do you think of the total population identifies as sexually fluid? So, okay. Okay, it's actually 10%, but I would say it's higher, personally speaking. Yeah, between 10 and 11%.
That 10% is kind of thrown around a lot as like just something that we always refer to. Where's that come from? I feel like that the number would be higher now. I think that that statistic came from like a study in the 70s or something.
Well, they said I got it from the Victorians Aid Council.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, yeah, I think it would be higher as well. Okay. Let's click it on. I'm going to get you to do a question now. So, I mean, I know it's only Wednesday, but it's hump day, and we start thinking about the weekend. Just think to yourself, what are your plans for the weekend? What are you going to do? Okay. So hopefully you've got some plans. And then I'd like you to think about it again, but this time you're not allowed to mention your partner, your family or friends, the places you socialize, the magazines you read, the shows you watch, where you shop, or the movies you watch. So usually I do this like with a live audience and we get a lot of feedback, and we ask which one was harder to do. Obviously it's the second one. So imagine if you were a new student and you're a queer student and your teacher asks that in class after the weekend. And imagine if you're not out or you're not comfortable with your sexuality. It sort of gives you an insight what it's like to be in the closet, and also this obviously hinders language production. Okay. Tegan.
Sorry, that was me clicking nuisance before. So I just, oh gosh, no, I've done it again. Oh no, I haven't. Just have a quote here from Cynthia Nelson, 1997, who has studied and researched and written about this extensively. And she talks a lot about attitudes that people have towards incorporating LGBTQI themes into classrooms and curriculums and that kind of thing. And one thing that really stood out to me was this quote from her where she says, "Some colleagues are puzzled and even perturbed by the idea that lesbian and gay identities could have any relevance to language learning. To them, gay-friendly teaching is at best of marginal importance, of interest only to a small minority of learners and teachers, and at worst invasive, inserting a discourse of homosex into a field in which that discourse is neither relevant nor appropriate." And I have seen these attitudes crop up among people, colleagues of mine, and people in the industry every now and then, where they sort of go like, "Oh, why do we have to do this kind of thing? It's not really relevant to anyone. It's inappropriate to talk about people's sex lives in the classroom." And I think it's really important to make sure that we know what the counter arguments are to this. So the idea of relevancy, I think, is really important, because as Louise just demonstrated, if we take 10% of 870,000, then we're going to end up with 87,000. That's mathematics. And then it doesn't seem so irrelevant when you have nearly 100,000 people are affected by this in our ELICOS colleges and universities and TAFEs across Australia. So in my own context, we are a small ELICOS provider. So I think that was about 150,000 of those enrollments. So even then, you're still looking at 15,000 people in schools just like mine, who it is very relevant to, because it is their day-to-day lived experience. So the relevancy one is pretty easy to kind of flick off and get rid of. And this other argument that it is invasive, and because we're talking about homosexuality or other things like that, then we're talking about sex. And I think this is a really outdated mode of homophobia in particular, where it's like the over-sexualized nature, people over-sexualize the nature of queer people. And so you're like, oh, well, if you're talking about gay relationships, you must be talking about sex. And it's like, well, not necessarily, because the topic of weddings comes up all the time in language classrooms. What are the wedding traditions in your country? What do people do in your culture when they get married? And that kind of thing. You could say from a white Australian point of view, it's like, oh, well, we wear a white dress to our weddings because we're virgins. And that's a discourse of sex. So I think this is a really outdated idea. And you can talk about people's personal lives, dating and friends and film and all those other things that Louise mentioned before, without explicitly talking about sex. It's actually very easy to do, and we do it all the time with heterosexual relationships. So I just think these are the kinds of arguments that we need to be prepared to talk about and discuss quite openly if we're trying to bring in queer-friendly discourse into language classrooms. I'm just going to move on to the next slide. If you have any questions about anything at any time, jump in and write them to Sophie, who will let us know. So this quote, heterosexual teachers may have concerns about whether in the course of addressing gay and lesbian issues, they may inadvertently say something ignorant, insensitive, or inappropriate. And these are other really common attitudes as well. This one I have a little bit more time for, because it's about not wanting to offend anyone by getting it wrong. So, there's people being sensitive towards that. But I think what we need to address here is this idea of like, oh, well, I can't talk about something perfectly, so I just shouldn't talk about it at all. But we do it all the time in language. If I had to teach a business English course, I'd just be making it up on the spot. I'm not a business English teacher. And I don't worry that I'm going to offend people by getting that wrong. You know, I go away and do my homework first and make sure that I don't get it wrong. Is probably a better way of actually looking at it.
I think you once said that as well, like, I don't know about like a language point. Well, what do? Go away and research it.
Yeah, that's true. Exactly. If I'm not sure, then I can go and find out, because the internet exists, and it's really helpful. And if you are worried about saying something ignorant and insensitive, that's actually a really wonderful attitude to have. But you then need to go away and educate yourself. So I think that those ones are quite easy to overcome as well, if you're willing to learn and open-minded and ready to make mistakes. So we're going to look at a little bit about what inclusive classroom practice is. So feel free to write in more examples if you have any as well. So a really easy and obvious way to make your classroom more inclusive of all your students is to have really diverse discussions. So when you're looking at, maybe you're looking at a bit of pop culture or something in the news, stretch further afield than what you see just in front of you, and seek out things happening in communities that you're not necessarily a part of. So that could be, for example, I think some of my examples are a little bit outdated actually, so if anyone has any more.
You could think about the latest Bolsonaro in Brazil.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Prime Minister
yeah.
or President?
President.
Sorry, President. Whose views on LGBTQI rights are quite embarrassing and disgusting. So that's, you know, something to bring up in the classroom as well. If you
looking around for kind of international days as well. So 8th of March, for example, is International Women's Day. And last year in my classroom, I wore my shirt that says "Topple the Patriarchy." And my students would sort of look at it going like, what does this mean? What is this shirt about? And I said, well, it's International Women's Day today. And then we had this incredible discussion. They learnt a lot of great vocabulary, like topple and patriarchy. And we talked about International Women's Day and what it means in different countries. I learned a lot about their countries as well. Like my Japanese student had never heard of it before. And somebody else, I think from Colombia, I want to say, said, oh, it's massive in Colombia. And it turns out, we did a bit of research, and it turns out that the UN pushes it in certain countries where they feel like gender equality is starting to lag behind. So yeah, we all learned a lot from that. So things like that are really obvious things you can talk about in your classroom in a discussion way, you know, not just what did you do on the weekend, but did you hear about this on the weekend? Managing the discussion so that they remain respectful is really important. And a big part of that is maybe not calling students out in front of everyone if they have a more ignorant attitude. So combating those homophobic attitudes as ways of helping students to learn and become better at critical thinking. If someone is perpetuating a negative stereotype, for example, you could say, well, what are some stereotypes of people from your country? And they know them all. Everyone knows their own negative stereotypes. I'm from Queensland. It's fine. Oh, sorry, Louise. How are you? I've forgotten what I was saying. Oh yeah, so what are the stereotypes of people like you? And then they go like this and that, and is that true of everyone? Is it true of you? And they go, no, of course not. And they get offended at that idea. You say, okay, let's apply this over here, and we get the same kind of results. And it just helps students to become deeper thinkers in general. Kind of opens their minds and opens their eyes a little bit. And another great thing to do is highlight institutionalized heteronormativity and everyday sexism. Like, where is it? Is it coming up? Oh, there we are. So this is from English File, published by Oxford University. And it's one of those little communicative activities that they have that are usually really great, where one student says something and the other student has to respond. And this one they were learning, it's in the advanced one, they were learning how to say like, oh, how ridiculous, that's absurd. So the idea is that they say, did you know you're not supposed to call female actor an actress because it's considered sexist? And the other person is supposed to go, oh, that's ridiculous. Political correctness has gone too far. I may have read a little bit extra into that. I don't know. And the teacher who pointed this out to me, he just wanted to show me and goes like, whoa, have you seen this? What do you think of this? And we were both a bit horrified. I was like, well, what did you do with that when you came across it in the class? He's like, oh, the whole class noticed straight away. You barely have to point this out to them. It's like a girl in the class pointed out and just went, oh, what's this about? So instead they flipped the activity on its head and they had to rearrange the sentence to say things like, what was it? It was something brilliant like, they look at, did you know that some people won't move into the 21st century and think that political correctness is a bad thing? And the other person goes, that's ridiculous. So they had a bit of fun with it. And again, it's a deeper level of thinking, and it's great critical thinking skills, questioning something. Just because it's published in a book, it doesn't mean it's right. So yeah, there's lots of things just little things that you can do in your everyday classes to bring in a heightened level of awareness about things like this. And I'll hand it back over to Louise. You can have control again.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so here we have the actress Lily Tomlin, and she, I saw a quote a couple of years ago that she made, and it really resonated with me, and that's when I decided to do something about supporting the international LGBTQI community. Because as you can see, we've acknowledged so far in this presentation, it is a little bit harder for these students to actually be themselves, to feel safe in the classroom. And you often see maybe a news report on social media that is quite disturbing, and you're like, oh, or a social injustice, and you think to yourself, oh, that's terrible, and you may like it, well, not like it as in you don't like it, but you like the button, and then you might share it. But how often do you actually go away and action it, do something about it? So yeah, so she made me do something. Thank you, Lily. Okay, so growing up, either all of us, whether we are queer or straight, all of us have learned messages about the LGBTQI community. For me, I'm actually from Tasmania, so I don't Tasmania. So it was it's quite conservative down there. And I remember watching a television program called Countdown, which lots of video clips, and I remember seeing Boy George for the first time, and I was very intrigued with him because you had the makeup and the way he dressed, and you never saw anything like that in Tasmania. So I was like, oh my god! But then in the background, I could hear all this sort of white noise of people going, oh, look at him, he's a freak. Oh my god, is it a man or is it a woman? Luckily, that didn't have any effect on me. Like I was just intrigued by him and opened my mind. But a lot of us, can you sort of think what your earliest messages were about queers, and were they positive or negative? Mine were positive. What about yours? I'll just let you reflect on that. Just flick it. here are some other questions that are, like challenges and are thought-provoking as well. And it's good to do, like in, with your teaching cohort as well, and, just get you thinking about it as well. Next slide. So, what I've learned is that for many international LGBTQI students, simply knowing that allies exist is a great source of support. Research shows that having a supportive school system and staff has a very positive effect on a student's educational experience. A lot of you would know that Scotland is going to become one of the first countries in the world to embed LGBTQI inclusive education into the system. It's going to be piloted this year and then fully implemented in 2021. So hopefully it will be a source of inspiration for other countries to do that too. So I think I saw this as well on social media. Remember, ally is a verb, like you have to actually do something. So what can we do in our institutions? So what I did last year was went and asked a group of international students what could be done to embrace or support you as a queer student in the school that I work at, Navitas. So if you just quickly want to have a skim over the colourful cloud and comments. Just click on to the next slide. I think I know the main takeaway points from those students is visibility. So they want to be seen more and supported more. So let's go again to the next slide. So how can we be more of a queer ally? So a lot of you may have seen people wearing rainbow bands or rainbow lanyards around. And obviously, hopefully you know what they mean. I mean, you support LGBTQI. And it's a symbol. The rainbow is a symbol for the LGBT community. So wearing one of these is a great source of support. It doesn't mean you are gay or queer. It just means, that you support international LGBTQI. I've done a lot of presentations and sessions, not only within this school, but also around other schools, and we give away lots of rainbow bracelets. And you'd be surprised, like weeks later, the amount of students that come up to you and like, I'm still wearing the bracelet, I love it. So it's just like that little token of support. Nothing big. So it can go a long way. Just going to the next slide. So,
another way of bringing in visible support is, of course, having the rainbow lanyards, bracelets, that kind of thing. Actually, I got my rainbow lanyard here with my keys on it. Also, safe space posters of some sort, just to reinforce the idea that the organisation is on board, and that if someone feels bullied or harassed because of their gender or sexual orientation or something like that, to know that they can tell someone from the organisation, the institute, and the school will stand behind them. They won't protect, for example, the bullies or the harassers or anything like that. So, like, no, we want to look after you. We don't want to protect the bullies. So these are really easy to just put up around the school. You just get a colour printer and a laminator and some blue tack or some thumbtacks, and you can put them in the student break spaces, the classrooms, the teacher's room and staff room. I'm not actually in my office at the moment because it is just a thoroughfare of people coming and going at this hour. But in my office, we've got a huge rainbow flag stuck up above my desk with the safe space posters, so that students do their placement tests often in my office. So it's kind of the first thing that they see. Our academic manager does the teacher interviews and recruitment in that same office as well. So it's kind of the first point of contact for new people coming into the school, not just students. And the other one is a sign for the bathroom. It actually has a white background, the ones that I've got. And just putting those where it says this organisation, putting the name of your school, putting those around on every bathroom door. We can't change the infrastructure in our building, of course, to not have segregated bathrooms, but what we can do is make sure that our trans students and staff know that whichever bathroom is that they use, that's fine with us. So they don't have to worry, or they don't have to go like, oh, I can't go to the bathroom because I don't know which one I should be using. That's never a problem. So, and I think that's really, really important. And again, these are really, really easy to put up and kind of maintain. You just make sure they're still there, check on them every other week. And yeah, it takes an hour of printing, laminating, and sticking them up around the place. And then it makes a huge difference. Yeah, Louise, did you?
Well, I'm just going to say, if anyone wants a copy of the Safe Space poster, I'm more than happy to distribute that. We've also changed it. We've put it's an inclusive space for students and staff as well, because we have a lot of queer staff here. I also do, when I do orientation, like welcome the new students on day one, I flip up this poster and just make it clear that you know it's an inclusive school, a safe school for everyone. So just highlight it from the get-go. It's also in our handbook as well. Another important thing is, as we said at the beginning, educate yourself. Make sure you understand. I'll just do that. Make sure you understand LGBTQI terminology. There are sheets everywhere on different definitions of like cisgender. I had to educate myself, when I started getting into this role, because a lot of it I didn't like. I was like, what does that mean? But now I feel a bit more confident. As Tegan mentioned before in the beginning about different days to celebrate, there's loads of LGBTQI days throughout the year. We've got Ida Hobbit. We've got Pride, we've got National Coming Out Day, and I think, was it 2 weeks ago, you had the Midsummer Festival in Melbourne?
Yeah, in Melbourne.
So that's incorporated into the classroom as well. And obviously the Mardi Gras that's coming up in Sydney in a few weeks, which I think we should talk about, Tegan, later on. So, like, ask yourself, do you have leaflets for LGBTQI groups? Is it in your orientation? Is it in your orientation pack, the handout for students? Is it a safe space to bring LGBTQI issues into the classroom? These are all important questions that you should be asking your management. Oh, there's Tegan. There's your office.
Oh yeah, yes, that's my office. It looks a little different now. I put up some more pictures of my family as well from Christmas. And that's the big old flag, which is basically the first thing that people see when they come to the academic part of our school. And the picture on the left is a very weird angle of part of our student lounge, but basically in the top right of that image you can see one of the safe space posters, and it's worked into the notice board to not be separate or othered. It's worked in amongst all the normal school notices that everyone has up, to, I hate the word normalize, but I guess I'm going to have to use it, to normalize it all. It's just be like, oh yeah, that's just part of the school. It's not this big song and dance or anything too distinct. It's just business as usual at our school, and it's just part of the organizational culture. Maybe we can move on from this. There you go.
So nearly coming to the end of this session. So just like some facts again, like 72 countries still it's illegal for same-sex relations, and 8 countries it's still punishable by death to be LGBTQI. So like just to highlight, I think we as educators still have an important role to ensure that these students feel welcomed and accepted into a truly inclusive environment in Australia. So yeah, be supportive, listen, educate yourself, do your research, and create a recognizably welcoming and inclusive environment. This guy here, Hussein, he's part of the Rainbow Hub, and he's from, as you can see, from Pakistan. And he's actually not out to his family in Pakistan, but he flourishes here. He's doing his master's in public health. He's such an amazing guy, and just loves being part of the LGBT community here, despite not being out in Australia. I mean Pakistan, I beg your pardon. So I'm just going to quickly flick through the Rainbow Hub. So we are sponsored by Trade Investment Queensland. I won funding for this group, to create a safe space, to create a community for international LGBTQI students, and also to empower them as well, for them to be themselves and to immerse in the different local LGBTQI community activities that we have here. This is last year when we first commenced. We run fortnightly sessions from a student accommodation called Student One. I used to run them, but then it got a bit too much with my job as director here. So I got one of my students to actually run the program, and he does an amazing job of engaging and encouraging LGBTQI students. That's in there, Claudio, on the bottom right. I mean, I've got a great group of volunteers who help me with social media, because I'm not sure how to do all that, on all the pictures and everything. So it's really wonderful to be part of this group and community. Now, I wonder if this will work. This was a video that we won funding for late last year, again with Trade and Investment Queensland, and it features key members of the Rainbow Hub and also my daughters and my partner. So it's just a minute, so I'd like to share it with you. If it works. maybe sound's not very good. So basically, the students actually came up with the idea. They came up with the wording. It's like we are acceptance, we are courage, and we are the future. And we had a bit of a launch party where we had a lot of key figures, community figures, government and industry. So yeah, it was a great night, and we had a lot of queer students tell their story. You can. It's a little bit slow, but you can check it out on our website as well, or social media. So yeah, I'm just really proud to be able to empower these students to be part of this project. Oh, it's on again. No, we won't, but just yeah. So thank you. Now Tegan's great organisation.
Yes, in a similar idea. Weirdly enough, we didn't know each other, Louise and I, before we both started making the same program. Mine has a bit less flash because I don't know, I don't have the same kind of team of volunteers who know all the awesome video editing, making skills. But it's the same kind of idea. It's a social welfare program for LGBTQI international students. We meet regularly. We're just once a month, and our funding comes from the International Student Welfare Program, which is part of Study Melbourne, plus this in-kind contribution from Discover, and that's, for example, in the form of resources like the room hire. If Discover contributes a room that we can use for 2 hours at X dollars per hour, then we can get that in cash from the student welfare program. And these things are, well, my one was surprisingly easy to apply for. Louise, I know you had to do a bit of hoop jumping for yours and do an actual pitch in person. Mine was just a paper application, and I had a good email relationship with the person judging it, who gave me some great tips, and was very friendly and very helpful. And it's basically volunteer run. A couple of us at the school find a few hours out of the working week to set up like the Eventbrite website, RSVP page, sorry, order the food in. I organise guest speakers and some activities to do during the time, and then it's a matter of promoting amongst actually all the schools in Melbourne. So ours is not just for Discover English students, it's for anyone, in any international student in Melbourne, and I use my various networking skills to put the word out, speaking directly with the student services departments of other institutes, with the people in the academic management of the institutes. Now that we've got a regular group of students coming, I can get in touch with them directly. So it depends on a lot of collaboration, a lot of communication, which, you know, as teachers and managers, we tend to be pretty skilled at, I think. So I was just making it up when I started, and it's been going for about 1.5 years now, maybe even longer, actually. And it just gets easier and easier and a little bit bigger each time. What's really important to note, and this is what I often tell people when I talk in Melbourne about it, is that it's not a marketing or student poaching tool. If it were my job to poach students, I think I'd be pretty terrible at it, personally. And there would definitely be a more effective, more efficient way of doing it than starting a social welfare program for the queer international students. I don't know if that's a particularly effective way to get people to switch over to our school, and I wouldn't know because it's not what we do, and it's certainly not what it's about. And frankly, it's a little bit insulting when people have kind of raised this with me and said, like, oh, but it's at your school and it's got Discover on. It's like, yeah, but the idea of using a safe space and a support group for queer students as a business thing is so despicable to me that I would be, frankly, very offended if anyone actually thought that. And I'm sure Louise can relate. So there's some pictures of what we get up to. There's free food because if you want international students to do anything, you got to, any students, sorry, not just international students, any students to do anything ever, you promise them some snacks. And you deliver those snacks, and when they know you're good for it, that's when you get the return participants. We did some yoga, as you can see in that bottom left picture. That's just one of our teachers who just happens to have a yoga teaching qualification. So she came along and did that. And that was really nice. We might actually do that again at our next one. And we do things like speed friending and like group discussion and, you know, kind of ESL classroom activities that get people talking and meeting each other and making connections. We also get guest speakers, as you can see in the top right picture. This is Roebuck from Queerspace, which is a local community welfare group service in Melbourne. And they were really great, just coming along talking about what it's like to be queer in Australia. And they brought along all sorts of pamphlets and information about all different activities and events going on. And that was great. That was a lot of fun meeting them. And here are some of the groups that we have collaborated with. They're very easy to find, these kinds of groups on the internet. Again, the internet exists, so we can Google them and you ask someone, do they know about this? And ask someone else, and it's all just a big network of communication, basically. So, for example, I knew RISN, the Rainbow International Students Network, met one or two people from there who hooked me up with someone from the AGMC who got me onto Queerspace. I think also RISN told me about Yellow Kitties and told me to get in touch with them. So it was just finding who other people know and just kind of feeling out, seeing who's available, who would like to do this. Does this sound like something you would like to do? And then you get them in and hopefully they have a chat. And then you meet great people like Louise as well.
Likewise.
So that actually has brought us to the end of the slides. Did you want to take over, Louise?
Well, that's our references. And I believe the next slide is questions. Yeah, so
yes.
Yes.
Or comments.
So
questions or comments?
Okay, so someone's requesting a copy of the poster. Perhaps I can email that directly to you, Geraldine. Yep. Okay. And someone said, is there a link for the video? Where would be the best place to find the video, Louise?
On our website, rainbowhub.com.au. I think it's on YouTube as well. Yeah, it's on YouTube.
Okay, sure. And somebody has asked if you have any suggestions for when you get pushback from students in class or insulting comments when you're trying to deal with these topics.
Okay, so from my experience, I've had like a few teachers come to me and said that, you know, in class students will yell out, "That's so gay," and, you know, which they find, well, obviously it's quite insulting. So they'll come to me and basically I will just talk to the student by themselves and just, you know, counsel them, go through it, you know, do you think that's a negative or positive thing, you know, and just get them to be aware that it's negative. And no one goes around and says, "Oh, that's so heterosexual." Wish they would. But yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. And somebody's also asked what groups you would recommend, external groups you would recommend to hook students up with if you didn't have something in your own college or a group in other states, for example.
Good question. I know in Sydney there's a great group called Fruits from Brazil, and they are a Brazilian queer group. There's like thousands of members, and they actually assist not only in New South Wales, but here in Queensland, they will help queer students here, like by messaging, talking to them, supporting them. I think I don't know anymore, but I would do your research.
Yep. And did you say that was fruits from Brazil?
Fruits from Brazil, yeah. They're actually in the Mardi Gras this year.
Okay.
They've got a float, so.
So do your research is really good advice, I think. And I noticed, Tegan, you've really linked into a lot of organisations in Melbourne that you've found on the internet, essentially, and word of mouth. And how have students found going, meeting up with people in those groups who might not be international students? Is that confronting for them, or is how has that experience been in terms of maybe their level of English or that kind of thing?
Yeah, this is quite a recurring issue, and it was the main catalyst for starting Rainbow Connections. Is that we know that there are heaps of programs for international students all over Australia, all like the job hunting things and the welfare and the socializing to make everyone feel happy and comfortable. And places like universities almost always tend to have some sort of queer group or a women's group or something like that. But the huge problem is, of course, that international students and queer students have their own set of specific needs. And so that crossover between those two groups is even more specific, because you've got the language and cultural barriers on top of everything else. And so, yeah, people like Yellow Kitties that I had in there before, they are for gay Asian women in Melbourne, not necessarily international students. So a lot of them are actually Australian Asian women. And they had, when I got in touch with them, they had never really considered the international student angle for that. They are now, they've met a couple of our students who have started to go along to Hello Kitty things just because it's more specific and more their community. And yeah, at first it's like, oh, what do we do with each other? We don't, they didn't really know how to interact. But then, I don't know, I think when people want to connect, they just make it work and they make it happen.
Same here as well. There's an organisation called QAC, so it's Queensland Aid Council. So they promote healthy life and support for LGBT community here. But they've reached out to us and they've done sessions with the Rainbow Hub on sexual health. They give away free condoms. It's just quite incredible, the support that they've given us. So, which overall, the support of local community groups has been, to me, overwhelming. They're willing to come along and talk to the students. And actual fact, in QAC, they have information translated into different languages, so Portuguese, Spanish, Chinese. So, if you look for it, it is out there.
Okay, great. Yeah. And I found the same in the work that we've been doing on mental health. A lot of the community-based organisations are really willing to get involved with the international student community, and they're happy to have a conduit to the community as well. Okay, somebody has said, how can we support students that are preparing to go back home after coming out?
Well, that's a doozy.
It is.
I mean, largely it depends on where they're going back home to.
Yes.
And a lot of other things. It's very context dependent, I think.
Yes. And I've always proclaimed that I'm not a counsellor, but I can listen and give, I have contacts to support groups that can assist with this. I just think, that we're aware of it, but we've got these great local LGBTQI support groups that can assist with that. I hope that answers your question. It's tricky because the guy from Pakistan, he extended his visa and went to study another course, another master's, because he just wanted to stay here. He doesn't want to go back and face the life of being married to a woman and living a lie, because he said that's what he would have to do. He would have to get married to a woman and then go off and meet other queer Pakistanis. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. And just one more question. We've got a couple of minutes. How can teachers support students that are not out?
I think addressing things like Louise was saying about if there's a student in the class, for example, saying that's so gay as a negative thing, like really clamping down on that. And so any students in the class who are not out, whether or not the teacher knows who they are or whatever, just constantly demonstrating that they are an ally and they do not accept that homophobic behavior, and just constantly reinforce that, like, it's I'm an ally, this is a safe and supportive place. And because you never know who in the room.
Having that visibility as well, that's the most important thing. I've had many students come up to me at the end of their enrollment, come into my office and say, "Oh, Louise, I've got something to tell you." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I'm gay, but, you know, I didn't want to, I'm not ready to come out to, you know, my classmates, but I just wanted to tell you and thank you for what you're doing at the moment." You know, so things like that's, you know.
Yeah, it happens really more often than you kind of expect.
Yeah.
Okay, great. No, they're really helpful answers. Thank you. All right, well, it is time to finish. Thanks to the audience for all your participation and your questions. It was a really engaged audience. And thank you again, Louise and Tegan. It was amazing. I feel, you know, just so inspired by what you've both achieved with your groups and the movement that you've started really in the ELICOS community. And all the very practical ideas you've given us today are so easy for colleges to implement, and the message is simple and clear. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Okay, and just to our audience, the recording of this session will be available from tomorrow, so we'll email you a link to it tomorrow. All right, thank you.
Yay.
Bye.
Bye.